everybody. Welcome back to home learning. Very exciting. I hope you all had a good day yesterday. And today we're going to start our proper home learning. So I'm going to be teaching you English, and we're going to do a mini English discrete experience. So we're going to do it like we would do at school if we were using our reflective journals. So we are going to have a look at this book, which I think you will have listened to yesterday if you did the story time section, and it is all about the book The Way Back Home. That's the title of our book, and the author is Oliver Jeffers, who I'm sure some of you have heard of before. So we are going to use this book to help us to do a really exciting outcome for our English. So we are going to use this book, but we are going to change the ending and write our own endings to this book. And then once we have written our endings, I'm going to send the endings that you have written to a different friend in your class. So for example, if you're in Dragonflies, if Amelia has written an amazing alternative ending, I might then send Amelia's ending onto Winter. And Winter might have written an amazing alternative ending, and I might send that on to Finley. So it's just going to be, then you can read your friends' alternative endings, and that'll be something really nice to feel like we're still connected, even though we're not seeing each other every day. So our question for our learning experience is, how can we write an alternative ending to a story? So I'm going to try and be really clever here and share my PowerPoint with you. There we go. So this is the launch page that I have created. Now, normally we would do one at school, wouldn't we? And that's up to you. If you've got a bit of extra time and you would like to create your own launch page for the experience that looks like mine, then you are more than welcome to, and I would love to see them. But if you don't have time, because it's quite a lot of writing, then you can just use my one. There's a copy of it on the class website page for today, so you can print that out, or you can just have it on your screen to refer back to. So like I was saying, our question is, how can I write an alternative ending to a story? So that's what we're going to learn to do. That's our key question. And we're going to do this. We're going to write an alternative ending to the story The Way Back Home by Oliver Jeffers to send to one of our friends in our class. So what we're going to be looking at is we're going to think about what we need to include in our alternative ending to make it the best that it can be. So we're going to learn all about apostrophes in this discrete learning experience. So we're going to need to include the possessive apostrophe. We need to learn to use the contracted form of an apostrophe, and we're going to use some conjunctions, which is what we were learning in our Jill Murphy experience before the Christmas holidays. And if we want to be really super brilliant, we can use our even better ifs, and we can use that adventurous vocabulary. And remember, vocabulary is just another word for words. So adventurous words in our writing. We're going to use a wide range of conjunctions, so try and remember all of the ones that we learned in our Jill Murphy experience, and always use the correct punctuation in our writing. So remembering our capital letters, full stops, exclamation marks, question marks, and so on. So that's what we're going to learn all about in English, and then we're going to use all of those things in our writing to make our alternative ending and send to one of our friends in our class. So every half term we have a new experience gateway, don't we? A character gateway and a character trait. So our character trait that we're going to be focusing on, it's a brand new one for this learning experience, and it is something called resilience. I wonder if you have heard of the word resilience before. If you have, maybe you could pause the video now and you could talk to either your adult, if there's one with you, or maybe your pet, or maybe a cuddly toy, or anything you can find to talk to about what the word resilience means. Now, if you weren't sure, or you'd like to have a check to see if you are right, you can watch this video link. There's a link as well on the timetable if you can't access it from this PowerPoint. So click on the link and have a watch to see what the word resilience means and what our character trait for this gateway is for this half term. So you will have learned from watching that video that resilience is a little bit like perseverance. It means to try and try, but resilience means we don't give up even if we are finding it hard. And if we are finding it hard, we find ways to be able to do the thing that we're finding hard without getting too frustrated. So we're going to show resilience in our work, in this learning experience, by recognizing when we find things hard. That's the first thing to be able to do. So to know if you're finding something tricky. And then once you know that you're finding it hard, can you then work calmly to overcome any challenges that you might face? And then lastly, when your friends have read your story, they're going to give you some feedback on what they thought about it. And they might have some stars for you to say things that are good, but they might also have some wishes for you of how it could get even better. So you need to use your resilience to be able to take that feedback and take those wishes and know that those wishes have been sent because they want your story to be even better. And then we're going to show resilience in ourselves by keeping on going with our home learning. We need to use our resilience so much at the moment at home to be able to keep motivated to do our learning and to do it the best that we can, just like we would do if we were at school. And another way we can show resilience is if we've got an adult who normally works with us at home, but they're busy because they've got jobs or they're doing things around the house or they're with our brothers or sisters. If they're busy, can we think of another way to be able to complete our home learning if they aren't there to ask? So can we think of another way if we find a challenge that we can then be able to complete it without that adult help? That would be fantastic, wouldn't it? So we've got our story here, so I'm just going to stop and share my screen there. And we're going to have a read of our story, The Way Back Home. Again, you might have heard this yesterday, but I'm going to read it to you today. So here it is, The Way Back Home. Once there was a boy. And one day he was putting his things back in the cupboard and he found an aeroplane. He didn't remember leaving it in there, but he thought he'd take it out for a go right away. The plane lifted off the ground and up into the sky, higher and higher and higher. Suddenly the plane spluttered. It had run out of petrol. Now the boy was stuck on the moon. What was he going to do? He was all alone and afraid, and soon his torch began to go out. Up in space, somewhere else was in trouble too. His engine had broken down, and steering the ship towards a flicker of light, he landed on the moon with a bump. Both the boy and the Martian could hear noises in the dark, and both feared the worst. But as their eyes got used to the dark, they both realised they'd met someone else in trouble. They weren't alone anymore. The boy showed the Martian his empty petrol tank, and the Martian showed the boy his broken engine. Together they thought of ways to fix their machines and how to get them both back home. The boy jumped down to earth to get the things they would need, right down into the sea. And he swam towards home. By the time he got there, the boy was tired out, so he sat in his favourite chair just to catch his breath. His favourite programme was just starting and he settled down to watch. Suddenly he remembered what he should be doing and rushed off to the cupboards to get what he needed. He ran outside and shouted, but there was no reply. He couldn't be heard. The boy climbed to higher ground and called again and waited. This time a rope was lowered. The boy began to climb and the Martian began to pull, and soon the boy was back on the moon. The boy fixed up the Martian's engine with the right spanner, and the Martian filled the boy's petrol tank. They said goodbye and thanked each other for their help, and they wondered if they would ever meet again. After a long night, they were both finally off the moon. The boy went one way and the Martian went the other, both on their way back home. So that's the story that we're going to be learning a bit more. So if I just go back to my PowerPoint, there was a couple of words in there that I wasn't really sure about. So I've noted down some key vocabulary for us to remember. There might be some other words that you weren't sure about and you could research what they mean and write them down as well if you needed to. The first one was spluttered, when his engine spluttered. And that means to make a short or explosive or choking sound. So the engine is dying and it's making a funny choking noise. Flicker was another one, and that's where a light shines but unsteadily, so it flashes. It doesn't have a constant light like mine in the background, it's flickering, it flashes. Then there was also Martian, and that is something or someone that lives on Mars. And then lastly, we've got a spanner, which is a tool which is used to tighten some bolts. So you might have seen your adults at home using one to tighten something if something comes loose. So those are our key vocabulary words that we've been thinking about. So what I want us to do now is, if I just go back to our learning objective for today. So what I want us to do, now that we know what we're learning about, today we're going to have a go at ordering the key events of a story. So to be able to do that, our success criteria are to list the main events of the story, to find the first and last events, and finally, to compare the events and decide on the correct order. So what I would like you to do is, on the website page, there is a copy of the story, or you can watch the video from yesterday, which I'll also post on today's learning. And I want you to try and write down the order of the events, of the key events. Now, I have done mine by using little tiny sheets of paper. So I've cut some pieces of lined paper into squares, and I've written down the key events. Or if you didn't want to write them down, you could just draw a picture, as long as you're going to remember what it means. So the first key event I found was, a boy found an aeroplane in his cupboard. That was my first key event. My second one was, he took the plane out and he flew higher and higher and higher. So remember, when you go through and you look for your key events, you're not rewriting the whole story, it's just the main things that have happened in the story. So your first task is to pause the video now, get yourself some pieces of paper, cut them up, and then can you write for me the key events in the story? So pause the video now, and can you please complete that task? Okay. Now you've got all of your key events, hopefully, on your pieces of paper. And what I would like you to do now is to put them into the correct order. So yours might look like mine, or they might be a bit different. So pause the video now and just make sure you have put all of your events in the right order. So you might want to go through the story again and double check that you are correct and that you've got them in the right order. You might want to double check with an adult if you've got one there. Okay, so that's what I'd like you to do now. Check you're happy with your order, and then we're going to go through the order together. So my first one, like I said to you, is a boy found an aeroplane in his cupboard. I'm going to put that as my order, my first one down there. Secondly, he took out the plane and he flew higher and higher and higher. My next one, the plane ran out of petrol and landed on the moon. Meanwhile, in space, there was a Martian, and he was in trouble too. His engine had broken down. Then the Martian landed on the moon with a bump. The boy and the Martian were scared, but then they met each other. They had a good think about how they could fix their machines. The boy then jumped down into the sea to go and get what they needed. The boy got what they needed and he shouted back up to the Martian. A rope was lowered and the boy climbed back onto the moon. They fixed each other's machines and then they said goodbye. The boy went one way and the Martian went the other way, both on their way back home. So those were my key events of this story. I hope that yours were really similar and that you managed to put them into the correct order. Okay, your next task is that I would like you to try and make a story map out of the key events. So let me show you again onto my PowerPoint. There we go. So let me show you my story map. So you can see from looking at my story map, all I have done is taken my key events and I have ordered them onto my story map by drawing a little picture. So my first picture is a little picture of the boy finding the aeroplane in the cupboard. Then he's taken out to the plane, flying it higher and higher and higher. Then he's crashed on the moon. Then we meet the Martian, but the Martian crashes into the moon as well because his engine's broken. Then they meet each other. Then they think about what they can do. Then we've got the boy flying down to the Earth to get what they needed. Then he shouts back up to the Martian. A rope comes down. We've got the Martian and the boy are a bit sad because they're having to say goodbye to each other. And then they fly off in different directions on the way home. So the last thing, well, this is the second to last thing I'd like you to do now. I'd like you to pause the video and have a go at writing your own story map. Obviously, you've got mine to refer back to if you need to, but I'd love it if you could use your events that you've written down and draw your own story map that looks like mine, really nice and neatly, showing our care that we were doing before we went off for our Christmas holidays, and draw a really lovely, beautiful story map showing the order of the events for the way back home. So pause the video now and do that task, please. Right, that is the end of our English lesson today. So if we look back at our learning objective, we can see that we needed to be able to order the key events from a story. That's what we were trying to do today. So I wonder if you can just talk with the person nearest to you, or again, maybe your pet wants to hear about it, or a cuddly toy. And can you list the main events? Did you manage to do that? Did you manage to list the main events in the story the way back home? Give yourself a big thumbs up if you did. Second one, could you find the first and last event? So are you happy that your first event of the boy finding the aeroplane in the cupboards, and then your last event that they went their separate ways and went back home? Are you happy you found the first and last event and they're correct? Give yourself a thumbs up if you did. And lastly, were you able to put all your events in the story into the right order so that you could draw your story map correctly? And if you were able to do that, then you're super brilliant and you can give yourself another thumbs up. Well done. So just before we go, I would like you to think about our character trait of resilience. So remember, resilience meant that you don't give up even when you're finding it hard. And it's that finding it hard feeling that we need to overcome that shows that we are showing the character trait of resilience. So you might want to think about ways that you have been resilient today. Did you find something hard in our learning? Did you find something hard in the day and that you managed to use your character trait of resilience? So it might be that you showed resilience when you found it hard to order the story, because that's quite tricky to get everything in the right order. Instead of becoming frustrated You used everything that you had to help you. Maybe you watched my video again to remind yourself of the story. Maybe you have a copy of the book at home you remembered and you could go and look through that. Maybe you watched the video from yesterday's story time to remind yourself of the story and kept pausing it at each point to make sure you got it correct. And the most important thing is that even though you might have felt that frustrated feeling inside, you managed to overcome it and still completed your task. That is showing resilience. So if you did show resilience, I would love you underneath your story map to write in there for me somehow that you have showed resilience today. That would be fantastic. It might be to do with our English learning. It might be that you've shown it in other aspects of your home learning. But if you could write for me one way that you have shown resilience, that would be fantastic. So you can see that I have just done it here on mine. At the bottom, I have written how I showed resilience today. Okay, so if you could send me a copy of your lovely story map and maybe a copy of your pieces of paper that order the story in the right order, that would be super fantastic. And I look forward to receiving them all and seeing how you got on today. So good luck, and I will see you all tomorrow. Bye.